mga kababayan, para lang makapanatili ng legal dito sa Amerika ay gumagawa ng iba't ibang mga paraan. And one of those is getting into a sham marriage to an American citizen just to be a U.S. citizen as well. Is it worth it?
This American Dream segment is brought to you by Aquino & Lowe Law Firm, answering your immigration questions.
Attorney Richard Lowe is joining us today on Kababayan LA American Dream, of course, explaining to us all the nuances, all the updates on immigration. Attorney Richard, let's talk about that. A lot of people do that, getting into sham marriages to a U.S. citizen just to be a U.S. citizenship. What is the likelihood that you're going to get caught anyways?
It's pretty likely. It's very difficult to fool the immigration service. They do a lot of questioning. They can check your background. They will check. They'll do site visits and all that kind of thing, and it's very difficult. And I say it's simply not worth it.
And I guess for somebody that's in removal proceeding, we have this saying in Tagalog, kapit sa patalim, meaning you're going to do anything and everything just to be able to stay here. And one of the options that they turn to is getting married. Sometimes it's legal, sometimes it's bona fide, sometimes it's not. Can you talk to us today about that?
Yeah, I mean, what I think about it as a life decision. If you, outside of immigration, would be in love with this person and want to marry them, then maybe the immigration proceedings push that along a little bit quicker, but that's fine. But if you're just doing it because you think that you're going to convince a judge to let you go because now you're married to a U.S. citizen, then that's a big mistake.
Okay, how difficult is it to get married while in removal proceedings, and what do we need to take note of?
Well, I guess the first thing you have to know is whether you're detained or not. So if you're being detained in a facility, then you'd have to make arrangements with that facility to bring in a priest or whoever to marry you to continue that. If you're not, then you just get married like you normally would.
So you can't go out?
Not if you're detained. They're not going to let you out to get married. You're going to have to get married in that facility.
Okay, wow. Let's start from the very start. The presumption is that the marriage is not bona fide. Can you explain this to us?
Well, normally when you get married and you're going to go through the process of getting your green card, the presumption is that it's a valid marriage, but if the government finds anything wrong, they'll seek other documents or something like that. But when you're in removal proceedings, the presumption is that
removal proceeding.
That's correct. So
okay.
Your burden is higher. That means that you have to show by clear and convincing evidence that you, in fact, did get married for reasons other than immigration.
What are the three things to address this concern? The first one is petitioner must request bona fide marriage exemption. What is that?
There's a part of the regulations that require the petitioner to actually make a written request for the bona fide marriage exemption. It's basically just saying, I want to proceed forward with this and that this is a bona fide marriage.
And can you tell us about the Stokes interview? Why is it called such, and what is that?
Stokes was actually a case that came out of New York, and basically a Stokes interview is just where you separate the petitioner and the beneficiary and interview them separately.
Ask the same questions.
Asking the same questions.
And make sure they answer correctly.
That's correct, and then comparing the answers to see how different they are, whether there were major differences.
Okay, and number three is a greater amount of documentary evidence. What is that?
Well, mostly at this point, because you have a higher standard of what you're going to have to prove, you're going to be required to provide more documents to show that you really knew each other before you got married, that you're really going to live together, that you have a real relationship, and that can include letters to show that you have a connection, not that you found somebody online to marry you.
And it doesn't matter how long you've been together. You've been together maybe 2 weeks, a month before the removal proceedings. It doesn't matter.
Well, I wouldn't say it doesn't matter. I mean, it does. Obviously, it matters if you've only known somebody 2 weeks versus if you've known somebody 6 years. I mean, you're probably going to have more documentary evidence if you've known somebody 6 years. And it's a harder case if you've known somebody 2 weeks. It's not impossible, but it's just very difficult.
And I guess harder, too, if a person is detained. What about if the person is not detained?
Well, if the person is not detained, then what you do is you proceed in kind of splitting this up. You get the visa petition approved first, so you have to go down to the district office and go through an interview. Once that's approved, then you go back in front of the judge. A lot of times you can get the cases dismissed once the petition is approved because courts are overrun and they don't want these cases. They want the district to handle it. So once the petition is approved, if there's no other problems, no criminal issues or anything like that, the judge will go ahead and dismiss the case and you'll go forward with it in front of the district.
And how likely are petitions what are the chances of petitions like this being approved?
Well, what I always tell
90%, 80%.
What I always tell my clients is if you really married this person because you love them, then one way or another we're going to get the petition approved. So I think a lot of it just depends on how you're going into it. We've been very successful at our firm because we make sure that the clients that we're taking are in bona fide marriages. And a lot of times other people, other attorneys, or perhaps even notarios or those kinds of people will just say, oh, sure, go get married, I'll do this, and obviously their success rate isn't going to be that high.
Right. Okay, so now in closing, let us talk to those that are maybe wanting to get into a fraud marriage. What are the penalties, and why is it not worth it?
Well, the penalties are very high. It's 5 years in federal prison and $25,000 fine if you are caught in a marriage fraud. And that's
both the husband and the wife?
That's for both the USC petitioner, the United States citizen petitioner, and for the beneficiary.
Okay.
And the other thing that's really much more problematic than that is that it's a bar. So if you have information on your file, never get permanent residency in the United States.
That is scary. That is why we have Attorney Richard Lowe and Attorney Allison Aquino of Aquino & Lowe Law Firm to talk to us about our rights, explain to us the law, because sometimes we do not understand and we take things lightly. That is why thank you for explaining things to us here on the show. And also they do give free office consultation. That's the number to call on the screen. More power to you, and we'll see you in 2 weeks next month.
Thank you.
All right. Magbabalik pa ang Kababayan LA. Don't go away.